Hello, I'm Esther Giduyuat. It's Thursday, January 12th. This is Africa 54.
Human Rights Watch's annual report says that more and more people are taking to the streets demanding government respect and responsibility. Nigerians are rushing to get their voter ID in hand so they're ready for the February 25th presidential election. Benin's annual voodoo festival packed more than 1,000 spectators in a town holding the festivities. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
In its latest annual report released Thursday, Human Rights Watch says a litany of human rights crises popped up worldwide in 2023, from Ukraine to China to Afghanistan. The authors also say, however, that new champions of human rights have emerged. Henry Ridgewell reports.
The Human Rights Watch organization says that following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the global community deserves credit for unleashing what it calls the full arsenal of the human rights system, including an investigation by the International Criminal Court.
We saw immediate responses from the international community to mobilize around key human rights supports, including establishing international justice mechanisms, evidence gathering for war crimes.
In towns like Bucha and Izium, there is widespread evidence that occupying Russian soldiers tortured, raped and executed civilians. The United Nations Human Rights Council has documented several hundred civilian killings, thought to be a fraction of the total.
In some cases, Russian soldiers executed civilians in makeshift places of detention. Others were summarily executed on the spot, following security checks in their houses, yards and doorways.
Human Rights Watch's annual report also highlights ongoing abuses in China, including the mass detention, torture and forced labor of as many as 1 million Muslims in the Xinjiang region. Beijing denies the accusations. The report says the UN Human Rights Council's increased scrutiny of Beijing's actions is encouraging.
What we have seen for the first time in a very long time is cracks in the authoritarian armor.
In Iran, protests triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini after she was detained by morality police have grown into nationwide anti-government demonstrations. Human Rights Watch says the execution of at least 4 protesters must trigger a stronger global response.
We need to move beyond international solidarity for protesters and need to make sure that governments all over the world are holding Iranian officials to account.
The report cites increasing human rights abuses in Myanmar, where the authors say the regime is launching assaults on communities across the country that oppose the military coup. In Ethiopia, Human Rights Watch says the recent African Union-led peace process has resulted in a fragile truce.
Ensuring that there is accountability for the egregious crimes that took place in the Tigray region, for example, is going to be critical for this ceasefire and this truce to actually hold.
The report says climate change is having an increasing impact on basic rights worldwide. It says governments have a legal and moral obligation to regulate industries such as fossil fuel extraction that are incompatible with protecting basic rights. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
For more insight into how African leaders addressed crisis in 2022, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya, by Mausi Segun, Africa Director at Human Rights Watch. Mausi, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi, Stella. Thanks for having me.
Mausi, tell us, which countries of Africa topped your list of human rights abusers in the continent, and why?
Well, in Africa, it's difficult to point at just one or two or even a few countries. What we have tried to do with our report, with our annual report, is to shine the light on where we have seen serious cases of human rights abuses occur. And I would say that, our analysis shows that the trend is that where you have situations of conflict, armed conflict, communal violence, and social unrest, the opportunities for gross violations of human rights increase. So you look at, regions, it's not just one country, regions like the Sahel and in West Africa with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, where we've seen horrible killings of ordinary people by non-state armed groups. We have seen the enforced disappearances of so-called suspects by government forces, harassing community members, local people, villagers, in the claim that they are harboring insurgents by government forces. We have seen the torture and the massacre of hundreds of men, young men, old men, people of all ages. We have seen the gross violations of rights of women and girls targeted as, collateral and weapons of war by one side and against the other. The rape, the sexual violence that continues to occur. From West Africa, we can also look at northern Ethiopia, the Tigray region, but also elsewhere in that country. But if we move slightly outside of the regions where we have conflict, I would say, I think hands down, the countries where the opportunity for independent scrutiny of human rights conditions would be the top of our list. And, amongst those few countries, I would place Eritrea. Eritrea is one of the most difficult countries to access, to monitor, to document human rights, and to hold anyone, including the president, accountable.
Mausi, but who holds these government authorities responsible for what they do? I know you mentioned some insurgents, committing atrocities against civilians, but who should hold the authorities responsible for what some of these countries have done to its own citizenry?
So, for one, there are local laws that prescribe what the sanctions should be for anyone implicated in the abuse of human rights. And so we can say authorities in general, but there are certain individuals. So part of what we do in partnership with our other groups, including those at national and domestic levels, is to identify the individual officers and those who have command responsibility for those who carry out the abuses. Hold individuals to account, because when we put a blanket label of authorities or institution, it's easy for individuals to escape with any kind of scrutiny. So what we do is to focus on who carried out the act, who gave the order, and who is responsible and has command and control over those forces, whether those are government forces or non-state actors. Non-state actors also have some form of organization and hierarchy, and to hold those individuals to account, as we've done in a number of cases, including with Darfur, where we're beginning to see the International Criminal Court open cases at least against one of those who have been indicted for crimes against civilians in that context. And we're seeing it elsewhere as well. That's key. The other key is documentation is critical. Documentation of the abuses, documentation by local groups, by individuals, those witnesses, the victims, ensuring that there is a record and that authorities cannot claim they do not have, knowledge of the abuses. And then you have, mechanisms like the African Union human rights mechanisms, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. You have international institutions. I've mentioned the International Criminal Court, but there is also the United Nations Security Council, as well as the Human Rights Council in Geneva.
All right. Thank you so much, Mausi, for your insight. Mausi Segun is the African director at Human Rights Watch. Many Nigerians are rushing to obtain their permanent voters' ID cards as the presidential elections draw near. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Presidential and National Assembly elections in Nigeria are scheduled for February 25th, and governorship and state assembly elections are set to be held on March 11th. Several voters said they are ready for their voices to be heard.
Now is the right time. We have to effect change, and the change begins with everybody. The change begins with me, it begins with everybody in my family. Now is the time to correct all these anomalies that have been, and that is why I decided to pick up my voter's card and make sure I vote my conscience.
I came to pick up my PVC because I have to be a patriotic Nigerian. Because frankly speaking, over the years, it has been a situation of us not being very effective on our voting, and that has been affecting our society negatively. And in this time, we really have to put all effort to see that we are part of the decision makers of those that lead our community.
Nigeria's electoral body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, released a window in December for the last phase of collecting the cards before the elections.
Yeah, that's our only voice to control what's happening in the country. By our collection of the voters' card, we can have a choice of the people to run the affairs of our country. So it's quite important.
INEC says there is a surge of young Nigerians seeking to register for their voter cards ahead of the election.
Though I have not been voting earlier, but this time I decided I'm going to vote. Maybe because I have not been voting, that is why I have not been able to get a good president for ourselves. So this I decided, I'm going to choose a president, and it's going to be a better one for the Nigerians, and not for me, just for all my friends.
Only eligible voters with their voter ID cards are allowed to vote in the upcoming poll. Some Nigerians are not happy. They have criticized the INEC for how it has handled the distribution of cards. Nigerian lawyer Damilola Adolowe says she received an email informing her that her card was ready for collection, but after 2 hours of queuing, she was told it was omitted.
I got here, waited for 2 hours on the queue, eventually got to my turn, checked, they looked for my card, they said, oh, apologies, your card was omitted. I said, what does that mean? They mean INEC did not print it, they omitted to print your card. And I asked, okay, so what do I do? How do I follow up? They said, write your name and we'll call you. I said, is there anything else I can do? They said, no, we'll call you. And that was it. I think that's grossly unfair.
The electoral officials expressed concern in December about millions of uncollected voter cards nationwide. INEC has reported that over 6 million Nigerians still need to receive their voter cards. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Benin's main opposition is rejecting the results of this week's parliamentary election, claiming vote buying and fraud allowed allies of President Patrice Talon to win a majority of legislature seats. In the Thursday press conference, Democratic Party leader Eric Hundete denounced what he called flagrant ballot box stuffing, rigging and vote buying by the two pro-government parties without providing immediate evidence. Sunday's vote was a key test for Benin, where President Talon has promoted a program of economic and political development. A statue in Benin of one of the female warriors of Dahomey, which appeared in the Hollywood film The Woman King, was likely built by a sanctioned North Korean company, according to evidence discovered by VOA's Korean service. But the Beninois government denies the statue was constructed by North Korea. Henry Wilkins reports from Cotonou.
The female warriors of the Kingdom of Dahomey are a touchpoint in Benin's cultural history and a source of national pride. Their story was recently dramatised in the historical Hollywood film The Woman King. Since this statue was unveiled in Cotonou by President Patrice Talon in July 2022, it has drawn visitors from all over the country and region.
It's a symbol of struggle, because in their time it was almost unheard of to see women fighting instead of men and defending their territories.
The Amazons fought for Benin, for Dahomey. They were fighting women and played important roles in the country. I am glad I came to see this statue. It is very beautiful.
But a recent investigation by VOA Korean discovered the statue was likely built by the Mansudae Art Studio in North Korea, which is famous for creating statues of the country's dictators and, through its overseas project arm, monuments around the world. Mansudae is currently under United Nations sanctions designed to stop North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, from accessing foreign currency that could help finance the country's nuclear weapons program. The UN Security Council Sanctions Committee on North Korea, set up in 2006 to monitor the economic sanctions imposed on the country, does not speak publicly to protect the identity of its members, but it provided VOA with the following written statement on its investigation into the statue. The Benin authorities' response to the panel's questions contained in that report did not allay the panel's concerns that the construction of the statue had been a clear breach of UN sanctions against North Korea, and that the monies thereby gathered by the Mansudae group could have contributed to the continuing development of North Korea's WMD programs. VOA spoke to Benin Tourism and Culture Minister Babalola Jean-Michel Hervé Abimbola and presented VOA Korean's evidence to him.
C'est une statue qui a été dessinée par un plasticien béninois.
It was designed by a Beninese artist called Julian Sinzogan, who is well known and can be identified. Benin then turned to companies that specialize in bronze casting. As far as I am concerned, it was made by China. But did they use Korean engineers? And from which Korea? I don't know. Only the foreign minister can say.
The VOA Korean investigation found the order for the statue was placed by Benin's government with the Blue Dragon International Development Company, believed to be a China-based front for Mansudae.
This interview is no good. It must be stopped. I am not doing it.
VOA was asked to stop recording. Even when sanctions are breached, the UN has little power to make the nations involved face consequences. Sanctions have so far proved ineffective in preventing North Korea from pursuing its nuclear weapons program. North Korean authorities did not respond to a request for comment. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Cotonou, Benin.
Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll have the sights and sounds of Benin's national voodoo holiday. Stay with us.
In 2022, we witnessed a record number of women running for political seats across Africa. However, only a few of them got elected. The same scenario repeated itself across the diaspora in major countries such as Brazil and the US, home to the largest Black communities in the world. On this week's Our Voices, we'll have a look at the representation of African women and women of African descent in politics. We will hear from experts and advocates on why women's political participation is critical for democracy. Join the conversation each week, right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Amnesty International says a purported video showing soldiers tossing a corpse onto a pile of burning rubble in Mozambique's jihadist heat north gives a glimpse of what's happening in a forgotten war. Amnesty says the video is another horrific event that shows what is going on away from the attention of the international media. A Tunisian court has jailed 9 members of an all-women terrorist gang accused of plotting to assassinate a government minister. It is the first known case of an all-woman jihadist group. 2 of the ringleaders were jailed for 25 years, while the other 7 were handed sentences ranging between 3 and 14 years. 1 woman was acquitted. And Guinea-Bissau President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, current president of the Economic Community of West African States, is expressing support for jihadists hit Burkina Faso less than 5 months after an insurgency sparked by Islamist militants triggered a new coup. Air traffic control operations are back to normal across the United States after thousands of flights were canceled or delayed by a malfunction in the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration systems that left pilots, airlines, and airports without crucial safety information for hours. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has the details.
Frustrated passengers as more than 9,000 flights in the United States were canceled or delayed Wednesday as the Federal Aviation Administration grounded all commercial planes for 90 minutes.
What I was told over the phone is that it's like a 9/11 situation with a full ground stop.
President Biden said he spoke with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg early Wednesday.
Aircraft can still land safely, just not take off right now. We don't know what the cause of it is. They expect it to be able to, in a couple hours, they'll have a good sense of what caused it.
The cause was an outage in the FAA's Notice to Air Missions computer system, or NOTAM. The system was rebooted at 5 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, but by 7 a.m. the issue was still not resolved, said Buttigieg.
So at that point, the move was made to institute a ground stop until FAA could completely validate not only that the NOTAMs were populating correctly, but that they were actually getting out to the aircraft. By 9 a.m., FAA was satisfied that everything was working properly in that regard. That's what allowed the ground stop to be lifted and the flights could go.
NOTAM is crucial because it alerts pilots of conditions that could affect safety.
Did a runway close? Did the instrument landing system close? Did a frequency change? Is a VIP person landing at the airport and the airport will be closed for an hour?
Officials say there's no evidence of a cyber attack, but there is bipartisan concern that FAA systems are outdated, especially in light of the chaos due to rampant airline cancellations last year, including by Southwest Airlines over the year-end holiday.
Every 5 years, there is a review of the FAA authorization, and that is coming up this year. So we welcome the attention from Congress to ensure the FAA has what it needs to address these issues.
It's unclear how much the temporary grounding will cost the airline industry. Meanwhile, Southwest Airlines said the 16,700 flights it canceled over the holidays could cost the company as much as $825 million. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
More than 1,000 people visited the coastal Beninese town of Ouidah on this week for an elaborate festival to mark the country's national voodoo holiday. Krista Kilburn has more.
Voodoo guardians of the night swirled for worshippers and tourists alike in Benin on Tuesday. The performance was part of a festival held to mark the country's national voodoo holiday. Over 1,000 people gathered in the small Atlantic coast town of Ouidah to watch the elaborate annual rituals of dance and drumming to honor the religion's gods and spirits. The town was once considered an important port in the slave trade. Voodoo was, according to spiritual leader Dagbo Hunanhuna II, a form of resistance.
Our brothers, sisters, parents that had gone to the other side at the Atlantic, we didn't know where or when they would come back. So it was said that rituals needed to be performed so they could come back. So this has been going on for decades to say that what is bad must not be repeated.
Voodoo was practiced by around 12% of Benin's 13 million people. Authorities want to use its deep spiritual roots and spectacular customs to attract more tourists and boost the agricultural-dependent economy. Nigerian therapist Flora Dominis is among the influx. She traveled to the festival with friends from the Caribbean.
This festival is very important because it represents the roots of our African traditions. And I work a lot with people from the Americas who have links to slave history. And so for them, there is a lot of interest in discovering the roots of our ancestors.
The government has plans to boost visitors. It's set aside a stretch of beachfront from the main city Cotonou to Ouidah as a special tourism zone and hopes to attract travelers to historical slave sites, pre-colonial palaces, and natural wonders.
That was Krista Kilburn of Reuters reporting. Nature photographers from around the world expressed their sentiments about an ever-changing planet in a contest sponsored by Nature Conservancy, an environmental non-profit. VOA's Julie Tabo has more on the winning images.
Dewdrops shimmer like diamonds on this purple heart flower. A fan-throated lizard catches some sun on a wind farm in India. And a drone shot of a secluded highway in Tibet reveals a tree shape formed by erosion. These are just a few images by photographers who captured unique aspects of nature in hopes of raising awareness of the beauty and fragility of our ever-changing planet. The photos are among the winners of a contest by the Nature Conservancy, an environmental nonprofit. The competition drew 100,000 entries from 196 countries and territories.
This contest brings the world's photographers to our fingertips and our computer screens. We get to see every corner of the globe through another person's perspective.
Florian Ledoux captured this image of a polar bear nursing her cubs in an abandoned Russian coal mining settlement in Norway.
For me, this image is a statement that in the future, our society might collapse and animals, wildlife, nature will still be there.
It always takes a little while before the animals get used to you.
Coyote Peterson, a competition judge and the host of the Brave Wilderness Adventure series on YouTube, chose Ledoux's image.
I just felt that everything about that image was incredibly powerful. An animal's going to do whatever it needs to do to fight to survive. And when it comes to a mother taking care of her young, it didn't matter what the backdrop was. She was there for her baby, and that really spoke to me.
Capturing the image of this leopard carrying the corpse of a female vervet monkey with its baby still hanging on was a heart-wrenching experience for photographer Shafiq Mullah of Zambia.
When I first posted this picture on Instagram, I had a lot of negative comments coming in. Like, why did you save the monkey and how can you be so cruel? It was very emotional and also heartbreaking also. But us wildlife photographers, we can't interfere in nature.
For photographer Kaylee Che, who lives in Australia, finding and photographing bioluminescent mushrooms is a magical experience. Her shot of what she's nicknamed ghost mushrooms, due to their eerie green glow, won first prize in the plants and fungi category.
So those mushrooms look quite ordinary in daylight, but it comes in the nighttime, they are like a totally different species altogether. It glows and you feel like you're in a fairyland somehow when you're photographing them, you know, it's just amazing. Like, it's almost a spiritual experience.
While each photo is unique, they all serve as reminders of nature's beauty, fragility, and resilience, and a reminder of the importance of protecting and preserving natural wonders. Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.